I'm going up on the mountain. I ain't coming down till morning. I'm going up on the mountain. I ain't coming down.
Hello and welcome to our Goose Chat today. We are so excited that you're here and joining us to talk about geese, one of our favorite waterfowl for December. My name is Brittany Sweeney, and I am the communications manager with the Livestock Conservancy. I'm here today with Jeanette Behringer and our wonderful special guest, Jonathan Thompson. I'm so excited to be joining us as our very first international guest. Jonathan, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Norfolk in England, UK. And I'm not very technical, and I think you've all been brilliant getting me on air anyway. So thank you very much for all you've done.
Well, we're so excited that you're here and joining us to talk about geese.
I'm sorry.
What were you saying, Jeanette?
Yeah. I just wanted to say a few things. Jonathan, I think we go back over 10 years now, and you're always my go-to with waterfowl questions. And you've been kind enough to write some wonderful histories for a couple of our breeds, including the Sebastopol Goose and the Dutch hookbill, which, is practically a book in itself. And so I've really appreciated your research capabilities over the years. And, I was looking through your bio, and I found it really interesting that you research within the halls of learning. And could you tell folks, when you're researching a breed and putting together a history, what are your go-to places to start?
Well, for the very start, I look at all that's been written previously, modern and maybe Victorian and earlier books, and you get a few clues from what's going on there. But they don't always tell you the actual truth. So you have to go back to the original documents in every case. My dear friend and mentor, Professor Rudolph, came up with the omnibus dubitandum, question everything. And since corresponding with him, first of all, in 1984, that's what we've done all these years. And we corresponded up until his death early this year, unfortunately. But he's been a great help to me. And I must say, you don't find out all the facts on your own. It takes other people as well. And I think that these people, too, should be recognized. And I always try and accredit everybody who's helped out, because you simply don't do it alone. So the first thing is, maybe you go to a Victorian book and it's got a few references in it, and it's written something up, blah, blah, blah. And you think to yourself, well, is that correct? And it's given me something to look at. I think the biggest one, that shocked everybody, was your Cayuga duck, because for centuries, literally, it had the wrong attribution. It turned out that the breed that was being talked about was the wild Gadwall duck. So back to the original documentation, explode everything. It's as simple as that. But really, I started really back in about 1979. I was trying to find an English breed, the silver appleyard duck, when I moved to Norfolk, because Reginald Appleyard lived a few villages away, and they were originated there, and they become more or less moribund, if not extinct. So trying to find specimens of that was very, very difficult. And I convinced myself at the end of the day there were no living specimens from Appleyard's farm anywhere to be found now. And gentleman Tom Bartlett, who had a farm in Gloucestershire, was interested in waterfowl and poultry in general, and he actually recreated them. He told everybody he'd found them off a local market, but he hadn't. It was all very hush hush and oh, look what I've discovered. But we all kept very quiet about it at the time, knowing the truth. But yeah, you've got to go back to original documents.
Yeah.
Hell of a lot of digging. Anything else?
Yeah, yeah. And now I invited you on because you're especially known for your work with Sebastopol geese. And, you know, you put together that lovely history. And what was that like? Because you did some considerable digging with that particular history. And I was wondering if you could perhaps share some of the colorful stories, in particular, the geese first coming over to England and the trials that they had to endure on shipboard. I thought was really fascinating.
Well, how I found out about all that was quite fascinating, because that was very, very round and round the houses. The article in the Illustrated London News in 1860 mentioned that Lord Dufferin had actually brought the birds to England for John Harvey to give to his nephew, Thomas Bailey. So the first thing was, find out all I could about John Harvey and him sailing around the Mediterranean first of all, and then up to the Black Sea, visiting Sebastopol. And there wasn't anything in the reported press on this. I then looked at his family and discovered that his wife had actually written 2 books on their adventures on the sailings. And I was hugely amused that this man took a whole entourage on his yacht. And there were the women, can you imagine, in huge crinolines in 1860, on this little boat, basically, yeah, in all weathers, as Anne Harvey relates in the book. They were fed up with the destruction in Sebastopol after the Crimea War. They were there for, I think, 3 weeks and then decided to move on. And there they went round to near Balaclava and were visiting a general who lived on the island, and he gave them this pair of geese, as she says, much to Mr. Harvey's horror. So they were housed on the yacht, and they suffered all sorts of indignities in a gale. One decided it would consume turpentine and then had the sense to eat coal to counteract the effects of the turpentine. And by a miracle, they survived, and the Harveys returned to Istanbul and stayed at the English embassy in Therapia, which is a lovely, lovely part up the coast from main Istanbul. And it was there, as a social gathering, that they met Lord Dufferin and his mother, Lady Helen, who had been visiting. And Harvey wanted to carry on around the Mediterranean, and so did Dufferin. But Dufferin then offered to take the birds back to England, which they did. And Dufferin had been out and about. He'd been to Egypt and picked up all sorts of artifacts and treasures, almost like a late grand tour. And you know, all these things were going back to the estate in Ireland. But first of all, they were dropped off at Marseille and came overland, in actual fact, with the geese, and then over from Calais into England. And the geese were deposited with Harvey Bailey, who had a great collection of waterfowl and poultry, and was hugely interested in hunting, shooting, and fishing. And there he exhibited them at that first exhibition, and that's where that first line drawing was made of them. And that was, they arrived in 1859, and they were shown in 1860. But by 1863, there are reports of many, many fluffy geese, white fluffy geese, being exhibited both in Ireland and in England, which means that basically, okay, we've got the Dufferin Harvey geese being the first Sebastopols, remember the word, it to come to Britain, because these other geese were known as Danubian geese from the Danube Delta, so, of which the Crimea is vaguely part, or they're all interlinked. So these geese have been coming over on the meat trade, it seems to me. It's impossible for one pair of geese to have produced so many and been dispersed so far.
Yeah.
You churn out so many eggs.
Now, it sounds like, they always appear to look so delicate and fluffy, and a lot of folks keep them as, ornamental fowl, but it sounds to me like they're actually a fairly rugged goose, having, survived something like that.
They are. They're totally hardy. Mine only ever used shelters to make nests and rear their goslings in. Most of the time they were out in the meadow, even if through snowstorms, and snow and ice is quite fun for Sebastopols, because a bit like Gulliver, they get stuck. If you can imagine all those long feathers in the snow overnight, when they come to get up to be fed in the mornings, they lose a few feathers, which is quite amusing. But no, totally hardy. And nice characters, I found, always. I never had any trouble with a gander being bolshy and coming at me or anything like that, even with goslings. My last gander, he was a kidnapper. Any of his wives who produced a brood, he'd take them over immediately, and I'm going to guard these and keep everybody else away. But never nasty with people, which I think most people have found. Certain faction have said they've got fighting goose in them, which is an absolute foolish thing to say. And if they have, it's happened since they came over. I don't think it's in their general makeup, because of the size of Sebastopols, the size of the fighting geese, and the general head structure of fighting geese, it makes no sense. But yeah, Sebastopols I have found have been beautifully ornamental, both on the grass and on the water, and just a joy to have around. I actually parted with my flock last spring to cut down on the work. As you can see, I've got a bit sort of, I don't have colour up here anymore. So I've cut down on the workload, and the geese, I only had 15 at that point. They have gone to somebody who's actually going to breed them on and show them, which is I hadn't shown in a few years. I was finding it all a bit much, to be quite truthful, and they deserve to be seen out and about by the public. So I'm very pleased that Roland Todd and his sister have taken them on, and that they're going to be proliferated in Norfolk, North Yorkshire. So one of those things. Next question, Jeanette.
That's something that a lot of folks don't plan for very well, is the future of their flocks or their herds, and that you put so many years into perfecting a flock. You put your heart and soul into it, and then so many people, I've heard time and time again, that they just didn't plan for the future, and all that work goes down the tubes when there's nobody around that's got interest in it, and the family will disperse a flock. And so that's actually quite fabulous that you were able to find somebody to carry on the work, because it certainly would be a shame for all those years for naught.
Well, yes, you do invest an awful lot of time and thought into it. I mean, I had originally just two pairs from different people. The smooth-breasted, trailing feathered ones came from dear John Hall, now unfortunately no longer with us. And he was the one that told me that after the war, there weren't any Sebastopols left in Britain. Appleyard, they died out on Reginald Appleyard, but Appleyard knew where to get them, and had told John to go to Liverpool docks at a certain period of the year when the Irish boats were coming in, and amongst the flocks of geese which were brought over for fattening, he would find traily feathered Sebastopols, which is what he did. And he bred them up. He also produced buff Sebastopols, very nice buff Sebastopols indeed. And he always kept tabs on who had purchased his livestock and whether they were breeding or not. And that's basically what I did. My other ones came from Enid Manesse. Hers were the fluffy ones, completely, as per your standards, round and exploded all over, with bright red beaks.
Yeah.
John's had orange red beaks, but Enid Manesse's had bright sealing wax red beaks. They were mental. They were terrified of everybody.
Wow.
Never really settled down. So I kept the two lines, and I bred from both, and then I amalgamated the lines, and I never ever introduced any new blood. And I'd had them since 76, I think I first got them. 1976, and I never introduced any new blood, and we had no trouble with fertility. If you line breed properly, you don't get infertility or defects coming in them, as you would if you just had the one pair and kept on going. The fact that we'd had these two completely diverse gene pools actually worked all that time. So I was well pleased with it. It worked for me, and I think other people should consider line breeding properly. Go and find a copy of the Felch chart is all I can tell people, because that's self-explanatory and will tell you just how to do it. And
okay. Now, one thing I've never heard associated with Sebastopol geese is meat qualities. Have you ever had the occasion to, eat some of your culls? Or do people just simply don't do that with the Sebastopol because they're nice to look at?
I'm not stuck in the tack room plucking the damn things. Always. Every year. I mean, one year I was left to do 4. We had so many people coming for dinner. But that's a marathon. No, you got to cull. What I found was that we had a proportion coming completely smooth, no traily feathers, no fluffy frizzle feathers anywhere, just looked like a fairly large Roman goose. I kept the occasional female and put her to a very fluffy exploded gander, and that worked a treat, because you need to get the width of feather on the traily ones. On the fluffy ones, if you keep putting fluffy to fluffy, you end up with something that looks like a silky fowl. You lose the quality of the feather. It's the same with frizzled chickens. Always keep one, preferably a female, because then you can control where those genes are going. If it's a gander, it's likely to jump on everything going, and you may not want that. But no, Sebastopols dress out. I found at about £12 for females and about £14 dressed out for a gander. Nice flesh.
Holy smokes, that's a lot more than I would have thought.
Yeah, because they were graded up all the time. Basically, I suppose they'd be about £18 top weight live for a gander, which was quite big. John Hall always said to me, "How have you got them that big?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I prefer the small ones. Always liked the small ones." But look, and I had one frizzled gander, which, like Topsy, it just kept growing. And John Hall was always fascinated by this gander, and he was such a character that he always won when he was put out in the pens. Because he just loved people and the judges, and they couldn't resist him. But no, I mean, as per standard, no, he wasn't suitable at all. So my geese got a bit big at the end of the day. But I think the geese you've got in the States were actually, when they first came to the States, fertility was poor. And it's reported that they were put to white geese at the time. They may not have been Romans or anything like that, and the color of the beak changed to the orange rather than the pinky orange. And I think your standard still says orange beaks for your exploded geese. They eat. They kill out well. They give you a large proportion of flesh for the carcass. Normally geese are very narrow down the side. It's a bit difficult to carve at times. But no, I always found there was always plenty on the goose. I mean, one would feed 4 splendidly, and you'd have a lot left over for sandwiches. So you've got to cull and be sensible.
What kind of?
Sorry.
Yeah, and what kind of grazers are they? Like, are they easy keepers? When they're let loose or when they're able to be let loose. I understand you've got everybody undercover because of the AI outbreak in England right now. Are they very active grazers? And if they are, how are they coping with the AI lockdown?
Well, I haven't got them this year, but we had 2 years ago. And what happened, I managed to get them all into the chicken pen and subdivide that with more chicken wire. And then we put tarpaulins over the top because it's the spread of the other birds' feces and the contamination will spread like that. So try and keep anything you can under cover. They didn't mind because they were out on the meadow best part of the day. They were always called back in to a safe compound because we have lots of foxes around here. And just to call them back in off the meadow to an evening feed, they would get pellets and wheat in water, and they thrived on that. I think we had them under cover, basically it was about 30 feet by 20 feet the pen, and that was 15 geese in there. That was a lot. It was not big, but by changing straw regularly and giving them clean water every day, they didn't mind, and they were given cabbage, which they played around with and things like that. But no, I mean, they adapted to wheat and pellets extremely well. The problem I've got now is black-necked swans don't like coming off the water, so we've had to get huge nets and put over. But anyway, geese, geese I found were fine, and I know other people that have been more fortunate to have barns and outbuildings to put them in, and they haven't minded at all. It's ideal to have them out grazing, but they can adapt very well to a diet of pellets and grain.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like they're also good parents as well. Like if people wanting to get into Sebastopols, could they count on a goose to raise her own young? And sounds like the ganders jump in to help too. Are they typically good parents? I've always found them very, very good. To begin with, some of Enid Manessa's were a bit flighty, but after we crossed both sorts and whatever, all the females I let sit would sit constantly. You could put your hand under and see the eggs, or you could put your hand under and count goslings. Nothing nasty, and absolutely perfect parents. As I say, my old gander was brilliant, but all of the ganders I've had down the line, they've been there to the fore. This is my family. I'm going to protect it. If you come too near, I will hiss at you, but I'm not going to attack. And all of the females have been absolutely brilliant at brooding and showing the goslings, especially, that okay, there's grass,
but there's also your mash, the fine crumbs to give them a good start in life. They've always been very good, absolutely brilliant parents. I would say you could have a Sebastopol's ad lib if you just let them do it. I didn't always let all of my geese hatch. I was selective in what I wanted per year. And the other thing was that you can't keep everything that's produced, and there's a limited market. So I think people have got to be sensible about what is produced. If you want really tame geese, of course, you get either incubator hatched goslings, which I've never done. I've always taken, if I wanted a tame goose, I'd always taken a few goslings away from the brood and reared them at home. Literally, they go into the utility room and human contact, and you've got a silly tame goose. They just love you. That's one of the things when my lot would always go out on the meadow, and then as soon as they heard a voice calling them back, no trouble at all, we're coming back, he's going to feed us. And they would come up and do that patter, patter, patter with the feet that like they do when they're trying to get worms to come up for the youngsters. It's enchanting. But no, I mean, self-bred Sebastopols are going to be tame anyway. And if you wanted silly tame, then hand rear.
Well, they sound absolutely delightful, and I don't see any downsides to them. Are there any challenges with them? It seems like that biggest challenge is just understanding the genetics of how to get a well-feathered bird. Seems that you have to keep two different kinds of birds to produce the one that's well feathered. Are there any other challenges that you find with them, or are they just the world's perfect goose?
They are if you've got decent swimming water. With the fluffy ones and the trendy feathered ones, you can imagine you've got to have good grass to keep them in good order, and you've got to have clean water, basically. Otherwise, it's a challenge because the feathers do stain. If they're kept in a muddy situation or the feces around and it trails in that, they'll be green stained feathers. And if you want to show them, you can't just wash them out and fluff them up. So you've got to keep them clean all year, which is, I think, the only challenge that I can think of. Genetically, I've never had any problems. As I say, always keep one of the smooth ones, preferably a goose, and put it to a nice, either profusely traily feathered or frizzled gander. And I don't think you can go wrong. The important thing is you've got to keep that width of feather on it, even if they are fluffy. They look like a bad hair day otherwise.
Okay. Do we have any questions, Brittany?
Yes, we had a couple come in. Let's see. Randy said, what charts? You were talking about a chart earlier for how you do your line breeding. We could talk a little bit more about that.
There's a chap called Felch, Felch, American, I believe, and he believed in line breeding. If you look up a Felch chart, it will show you where you start with your breeding lines, your male, female, and it'll show you how to put the offspring together without inbreeding too closely, and how to introduce an outcross safely into your closed flock. But Felch was hot on that. You should be able to look him up online, I should think. Just a Felch chart. I can't remember his Christian name, unfortunately. I'll look that up and let Jeanette know.
Great question, Randy. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in today. It looks like somebody from the Livestock Conservancy wants to know, is there a market for Sebastopol feathers?
Luckily for me, yes. Plucking out just a couple or 4 every Christmas certainly produced an awful lot of feathers. We are fortunate here in the nearest town, which is 4.5 miles away, to have a feather mill. And they paid good money for Sebastopol feathers because of the curl. Because normally with chicken feathers, etc., if they're going into pillows, and they've got to be cleaned and then curled. Sebastopol feathers, they found they could just clean and the curl was retained. They didn't have to do the other process. So if you can find a feather mill, you should be able to actually make a few pennies.
Oh, great.
Or bucks, as you would say.
Now, would you after the bird is butchered, would you dry pluck the feathers, or how do you pluck the feathers so they're usable with the mill?
I always dry plucked. I always left them overnight. I never warm plucked them at all. I like them to hang, and then very carefully. Anyone who's hand plucked a goose will tell you, you do it twice. You take the feathers off, and then you've got its underwear to get off, all that down, which you easily do with your thumb, and it comes off much better rather than trying to rip off both feathers and down at the same time. I found them very easy to do. They're cool. The skin tightens, which helps with the plucking. I always use my thumb in grasping feathers and rubbing, and I've always found that quite quick to do. And take off all the long feathers, and then afterwards just rub the down, and I'll keep the down separate because that gives you a few more bucks.
That's great to know.
Okay.
Let's see. I don't see any more comments. You were talking earlier.
Well, Jonathan.
Go ahead, Jeanette.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
There's a bit of a delay, so we're trying to make sure we don't talk over each other. Do you have a favorite recipe for how you like to cook your goose or your geese? We're trying to encourage more people to cook geese this month. We're asking everyone what their favorite way to prepare is.
Yeah, I haven't got round to watching that one yet. Well, I suppose I must. I always put it on in a deep pan with a trivet on it, so it's not actually sitting in its own fat. And I don't prick them over until about halfway through. A lot of people like to prick them to begin with, but I like to put a lot of butter over them anyway. Having used their own fat as well for the roast potatoes, I like to put butter over the breasts and cover that with foil, etc., just as you would normally do. And please don't overcook goose, is what I would say. It should be slightly pink. Yeah. Otherwise, it can be a bit tough. So treat it like a wild bird, basically. Mm-hmm. Keep it like pink, slightly under overdone.
That's great.
Well, we this past week learned from Ariane Dagon a technique of first poaching and then letting it cool overnight in the liquid, and then butter. The butter was put under the skin, and her technique that she showed us at the class last week was phenomenal. I actually tried it out this weekend, and Brittany, I believe you're about to cook your goose today, aren't you?
I will be. Yep. The whole house is going to smell delicious.
Of course. So it should. No, yeah. I have heard of poaching them first, but I've never tried that. I've only ever had plain roast goose.
It's life-changing.
It's like a super brine. So I'm trying it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be delicious. Either way.
Yeah.
And of course you need sort
Yeah,
of
I'm down to my last couple of. I'm down to my last few handfuls of meat left. You know, I've done the roast goose, the goose sandwiches, goose soup, and I'm thinking I may make a goose casserole or something like that. But it's lovely. Even when I open the refrigerator, just that waft of goose comes at you, and it's just so lovely.
And I hope you save all the goose fat for cooking off other things like the potatoes. And I don't know if you have sprouts in the States, do you? Brussels sprouts?
We
Because
do.
they're good. If you parboil the sprouts and then toss those in a little hot goose fat, that's really good.
That sounds
You
delicious.
can also dice them and cut them in. So there's all sorts of things.
I'm actually married to a Frenchman, so goose fat is like liquid gold. So we're actually accumulating all our goose fat, and we have a small 7-pound goose that I believe we're going to try to confit with all the fat. So I'm looking forward to that. Should be interesting, and I'll let him take care of that since he's the confit master of the house.
Sounds very goodly. So, will you be having goose on Christmas Day? How do you celebrate over there, Christmas Day? Because Britain is going to cook her goose tomorrow or today.
Well, we've I like to do goose for Christmas. To do something a little bit different, and typically people do turkey, but I think this year is a year where people are exploring options when it comes to food. So I suspect a lot of people are going to just try something different because, people are staying home and you're not going to have the big gatherings, or you shouldn't be. And so that gives you a little more room for experimenting. And that's why we were hoping to encourage people to think about goose, because it's a bit smaller than the big turkeys that are out there, and it's different. Especially if you love dark meat, you're gonna love goose for sure. Hey, Brittany, are there any other questions?
Oh, yes. It looks like a couple came in. Matt wanted to know, why do you think the bill color changed? You were talking about how some of your geese had a red bill and then some had was it orange red?
Yeah, the trailing feathered ones were orange red to begin with. That has basically stayed. The Enid's bright red bills were almost strange, but they were the original color. Because Mrs. Harvey describes them as bright red, bringing them back on the boat. I think, mine changed. First generation, they were very, very sort of rosy orange for a long time, and that has gradually become sort of orange with a rose blush through it. The ones in America, I think, were changed in about the 1870s by the time they got there. It's all in my article, I think, about when the Americans got them, and it was reported that they were having low fertility and breeding them with other geese. Those geese, we don't know what they were. They could have been ordinary farmyard, barnyard geese. But at the moment, your bill color is bright orange, I believe, and I think ours has remained it's sort of rosy orange. Thank goodness, because at the moment we almost had two different standards, because we had a bit of a conflict here in Britain with various waterfowl clubs, and I was dragged in for the Goose Club to proofread what was being put forward as the standards. It was a sticky time a few years ago, but I think all that's settled down now. And as I'm well out of showing, I just keep a weather eye on what's going on and don't put my oar in too much.
All right, great question, Mac. Thank you for tuning in today. I have one more from Jacob. If you wanted to know, are there any tips for getting a goose to raise a nest? We have had a hit and a miss with success.
As I said, my geese were kept in the open, but what we had at the bottom of the garden, the 7-acre meadow, and you can imagine another rectangle of 3.5 acres of garden, which was fully fenced in to keep the vermin out. Within that, when they would come back in the afternoons, we had several. We had 4 4-foot by 3-foot by 4'6" high little sheds, open-fronted sheds, and just put some straw in there when the geese are getting ready to mate, and a gander will select where they want to go. I think it's, as long as they can be nice and cozy. Mine always used the sheds. I didn't have any going off into bushes, or there was even an island on the bottom pond, but they never ever bothered to go onto that. They were much preferred to go into where it was nice and cozy and dry. So I mean, but always position your little shelter so that it's the front of it is in the lee of the wind, so that the goose is not getting frozen to death in February when she's trying to sit. But that's what I would suggest. Look, you make a little cozy thing which is not too enclosed, they will use that, no problem at all.
All right, great. Thank you, Jacob. What a great question. Thanks for tuning in today. I think that's all of our questions. Jeanette, did you have any final questions?
Oh gosh, no, I think we've covered all the bases on Sebastopols. And Jonathan, I really I can't thank you enough for coming on. I know the timing's a little challenging. It's nighttime over there now, and I appreciate all the work you've done for us over the years, and look forward to what you're doing in the future. Do you have any breeds currently that you're researching?
What's been ongoing for about 12 years, Jeanette, has been the American Pekin duck. Complicated.
Only 12 years.
Sorry? So I've got the American.
I said only 12 years.
Yeah, only 12 years. You just don't get all these facts together in one go. Otherwise, you would have had stuff earlier. No, you've got to be thorough, and you've got to well, as you know, because I think you checked some of my manuscripts to make sure that all of my references were correct, which is only right. And I always try and double check everything. But the Pekin, the American Pekin duck and the making of is very, very involved, with one party saying, oh, this happened, and one party saying, no, it happened like this. And trying to find out exactly the definitive is very, very difficult to decipher at the moment. So I'm still wading through stuff. And I must say, your American universities and libraries have been so helpful in getting articles that I've requested at times. I can't thank them enough. As I say, you don't write these things alone. It involves an awful lot of people sometimes. And certainly the Pekin duck has been a real challenge for everybody. So you may get something on that. I think it gets to about 54 pages at the minute. So yeah, there's always something we need to be thinking about, Jeanette, before I go too senile to be able to remember.
Well, good luck with that project. And again, thank you for coming on our chat. And I look forward to our continued relationship and hope to hear, of your Pekin project finishing at some point. But thank you. And it's been a delight to talk with you and finally kind of meet you face to face. I missed you in England the other year, but one of these days we'll catch up.
Yeah. No, well, thank you both for making this possible. As I say, without you two, I wouldn't be here. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you all. And I hope I've done something to the furtherment of Sebastopols.
We absolutely have. People are very excited about Sebastopols, and I thank everybody for tuning in today and watching and joining us to chat about them. Hope you have a great week and a good holiday season. Tune again next week. We'll be chatting with Gerald Donnelly of Donnyweir Farm, and I think that's it. Thank you to all of our members who make this possible. Goose Chat's possible. We wouldn't be able to have programming like this without you. So thank you for becoming a member. If you're not a member and you want to become one, just let us know. Send us a chat. Send me an email, and we'll get you hooked up. It's that holiday giving time. I'm going to put in all of our shameless plugs. To become a member, those make great gifts for the holidays. And yes, make a gift. We love you all so much. Thanks.
Take care, everyone.